Kind enough to have given us the entire floor. Um, they've been kind enough to have given us the entire floor yesterday and today. So Frank is going to tell us a little bit about Microsoft for Startups.
Hey, thank you guys. Thanks for coming. Happy to host this event for you guys. So my name is Frank Dembo. I've been an entrepreneur for as long as I can remember. I used to sell and one mixtapes and pheromone cologne on eBay when I was 12 years old. That's how I got my start. Thankfully, my dad realized there were steroids in the cologne and shut that business down. But I've always been in the startup community here in New York, running events and generally trying to be a connector, helping people out. Been an entrepreneur as well, launched a company. Company went up and down. And then when I ended the company, I was like, well, I'm kind of unemployable as an entrepreneur. Like, I don't really know where I'd go. But luckily, at Microsoft, the goal is to find ways to support the startup community. And so my role here is to find ways to support all of you and what you're working on. And so if that means, space, if you have events, things like this that you want to have to host, to help other entrepreneurs, like we're happy to help out with that and give you guys space. We give the space for free, and so we're happy to do that. We have a program called Microsoft for Startups, where we help startups get customers through our enterprise sales force. We give them credits up to $100,000 in Azure credits, and so if you need help with that, if you need help with pitching and anything else with your startup, we're here to do that. And so feel free to reach out to me. My email is just frank.dembo@Microsoft. I'll be around for the rest of the day, so feel free to reach out. So have a good time. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. So how are we going to do this? Should I use this mic or should I just rely on this one? Use this one. Okay. So Lisa has decided to abandon me to my own devices. To my own devices today. I don't know how that's going to go. But I'll walk through the intro we did yesterday very quickly, and then I'll turn things over to our keynote speaker this morning, Rosemarie. So this is our inaugural global conference. We call it our minimum viable summit. Uh, we, I'm Brian. My co-founder is Lisa. We started building this community in August of 2017. We had our first event in November of 2017. This picture was taken during our second event, which was in January of 2018. We packed the space, the event space at SAP, and scared the living daylights out of them. um, uh, what we're building the world's first, largest, fastest growing, and most active network of mutually collaborative, grassroots-driven communities focused on supply chain, innovation, and technology. If you were here yesterday, you'll probably notice that for some very strange reason, all the speakers touched on these topics. Our mission is to nurture and grow the world's foremost open, global, multidisciplinary community of people. That's the community. It's a community that we hope you each want to be a part of. It's the community that we wanted to be a part of. We're starting in NYC, but the ultimate goal is to go global. And the vision is to create a global movement. We think that the problems that have to be solved in supply chain in the future are problems that are going to require teamwork and collaboration. And so that's what we're trying to build. We are creating a community where people can bring their enthusiasm for supply chain. This is where you should come and be able to talk passionately and unreservedly about why you're excited about what you're doing. We're your people, right? We're not going to critique you. We're not going to say that's boring. We're not going to say, we're not going to say, well, we'll critique you insofar as the criticism is to help you get better, right? It's not going to be the type of criticism where it's like, oh, you're back office people, like go away. We don't want to. So yeah, we're driven by enthusiasm more so than anything else. Okay, traction. Um, on August the 23rd, no, on August the 24th, which is when I called Lisa and asked her to help me out, to save me from the mess I had put myself in. I think we had something like 4 members. By August the 25th, we had 50 members. We're now 1,900, closing in on 1,900 members in New York. Half our membership describes themselves as executive management or C-suite. This is our 15th event. It's the first time we're doing a 2-day event. On average, we have something like 125 to 150 people show up for each event, and they usually don't want to leave, so we usually have to yell at them at the end of the event. The picture I showed you was interesting because it was our second event, and I think we had something like 180 to 200 people show up, which is what scared the folks at SAP. We couldn't have done this alone. We have a team of 10 co-organizers, and we're always looking for new co-organizers. Like I said, this is a network of communities. So we have 2 active communities, New York being the first and the biggest, the founding chapter. We have a chapter that launched in March in Charleston, and which is growing really quickly. You'll hear from Mike in the afternoon when he'll tell you a little bit about what's going on there. It's really exciting because he's proving some of the notions and assumptions we had about why taking a grassroots and community-driven approach would work. Globally, 2,650 members. There was a 3-month period, I think ending in May, when we added 670 new members in 90 days. We're hoping that we can launch 2 or 3 new chapters before the end of the year. The one that I personally am most excited about, not that I'm not excited about all of them, but we're hoping to launch a chapter in San Francisco. This is our mantra in Silicon Valley. This is our mantra. The world is a supply chain. Is why we believe in this concept so much. And after our launch, Fawad said it felt like he was at SASTA in Inbound and Dreamforce for the supply chain set. So we focus on bringing buyers and builders together. And yesterday I tried to explain it. When we were working up to the point when we started building the community, we noticed that when we were talking to the people who wanted to buy innovations for supply chain, they usually knew the business use cases, the problems that they were facing extremely well, but they didn't necessarily know how far technology has come along, and whether these new innovations that they were hearing about would be ideal to solve the problems that they're living with every day. And then when we talk to the startup founders, some who have a very technical background, they usually understood the technology extremely well, but they didn't necessarily understand the business use case well. And so the light bulb that went off for us was that someone needed to create a community where these 2 groups of people could talk to one another on an informal basis, in order to learn from each other, do business with one another, help one another out. And so that was the genesis, and that's why our focus has been on buyers and builders. Now, ultimately, if this is going to work, you have to bring other people into the picture. And so the R&D folks, the academics, the marketers, and everyone else are welcome, but our focus is really on buyers and builders. It's personal. It's personal for us. I grew up in an environment where supply chains are non-existent or broken and very inefficient. That makes life unnecessarily difficult. The same is true for Lisa. Her passion for the apparel and fashion industry goes all the way to her childhood.
I'll take it over. All right.
Cool.
I've had enough talking. Thank you. So what we're going to be talking about today is a global problem. Supply chains are global. They're connected to the world, and we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of factors that are happening around the globe that haven't really been as impactful on the way we do business as there are at this point in time. One of them is the fourth industrial revolution. for those of you that aren't familiar with it, we've been doing a lot of innovating, but the innovations have really taken a whole new twist with the advent of 5G, IoT. Everything can talk to everything else. That changes the game for supply chains. Our current trade wars and the climate that's happening around the world is really going to impact everything. So localization is starting to become a bigger push, not only because of sustainability and circularity that can be created through having localized supply chains, but because people don't realize that they need to play nice. The climate change is probably, I think, one of the biggest impacts that none of us can get away from. You know, countries can start to play nice together, but we need to all work on fixing what we've broken. And all of these factors, from the wildfires and droughts and severe weather patterns, are the new normal. So we need to understand what it's going to do for our crops that we are growing in which region, and how the climate change is impacting that region, and what it's doing for immigration and migrants that are all going to be displaced. Innovation. This is a big word that everyone throws around, and I think it's high time that we start to acknowledge that innovation has really been companies asking consultants to build them something that meets a criteria for incremental innovation. We are no longer able to take this approach. We no longer have the luxury of just incremental innovation. If you paid attention to the previous slides, that's not possible. So the only way we can achieve massive change is disruption. And disruption is really a paradigm shift. We're not talking about, oh, I can have a blockchain across my supply chain and have some authentication and transparency. It is about building entirely new systems that aren't beholden to your existing archaic infrastructures. So you'll see a lot of that in the presentations today. Speaking of the presentations, we have 4 key segments that we're going to be discussing today. And my favorite, not that I'm biased or anything, Brian, is the fashion supply chain. We are literally at the first point in time in history where every garment that you wear has been done by hand historically, and now can be done entirely with robotics. First time in history. Fabric is not an easy thing for robots to handle, but we finally have achieved enough innovation, robotics, and cyber-physical systems where that is now possible. So think about the impact on our global climate, on all the countries that we rely on for slave labor, for this cheap labor that's been transferring from one region to another to another. What's it gonna do to our global economic status and displacement of workers? Same goes for our logistics. Warehousing, obviously people are starting to understand that companies like Amazon have a massive advantage because of those robots that are now replacing the humans in their warehouses. Same is happening with autonomous vehicles, trucking, shipping. You have so many things that can be done now robotically, but we need to start thinking about retraining and reskilling existing workers so that they have a different piece of the supply chain. Maritime, that's another topic for today. I love that supply chain has been around forever. Since the dawn of time, your trade and barter has been transpiring between people, and bill of lading is a fabulous example of that. You get a piece of paper when you're shipping something from one side of the world to the other. And for you to actually receive that giant shipment that you've paid for, you need to have the piece of paper to be able to receive it. That's bananas. And that's because that's how it's always been with ships. We've had shipping trade forever. So now, for the first time, there are things like digital bills of lading. Blockchain, that's another big topic. We are seeing connected things because the world is now a supply chain, as Brian stated so eloquently. Everything is data. Data is going to redefine how we do business, what we're doing business with, transparency, authentication, and trust. Those are the key ingredients for requiring a blockchain. And all of those things are needed across supply chains. So we are at the beginning of massive change, and we're excited to show you the companies that are building it. We have a fund. So Brian and I are building a fund called Refashion Ventures, and we believe that these core areas are the most important, most impactful areas that are going to be driving the change across all supply chains. So next-gen logistics, we talked about, advanced materials, things like circular regeneration of textiles. There is massive legislation that's starting to happen, mostly in Europe because of our current political climate, but that are mandating that we no longer throw our garments into landfills or incinerate them. For those of you that aren't familiar with the textile or fashion space, last year in the US alone, fashion retailers had $50 billion worth of dead stock. That's stuff that they couldn't sell even at 90% off. And it doesn't go away. It goes away to a landfill. And we used to ship the textile waste to countries like Africa and Asia and all over the world, and they no longer want our waste. So thinking about circular regeneration of textiles and how waste is now a new raw material is a massive area of interest for us. Advanced manufacturing, Andre is going to blow your mind today with his on-demand shoes. Data and predictive analytics, again, data, artificial intelligence, smarter cyber-physical systems, and blockchain. This is our fund, Refashion Ventures. We are building this because, as Brian said, for us, this is personal. We come from places where changes across global supply chains impact emerging markets far more than any other space in the world. The impact on our homelands is massive, and we believe that there's going to be a redistribution of global wealth given the changes that are currently happening in supply chains. And we would be remiss to not say thank you to Microsoft. Thank you, Frank. Woohoo! Microsoft has been extremely good to us. They're not only giving us the space, but they are giving us the cold pizza and warm water that we're so known for. Actually, yesterday, I forget who, are you here, the guy that tweeted, I love cold pizza? I was like, let's make that trend. And Setlog, we have such a wonderful community that Setlog, Simone reached out to us as soon as she knew that we were going to be hosting this and said, take my money, please, do with it what you need to, and cut us a check. So thank you so much, Setlog, for your contributions. Linda Regano is our, where is she? She's around here. There she is. She has been our PR and media maven. You are here today and have heard about this event because of Linda and her efforts, which she has contributed at no cost to us, which has been exceptional. We've got amazing media representation from Sourcing Journal, from Reuters, Bloomberg, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, et cetera, that have all registered to attend and chat with us because of Linda. And lastly, Push Story, our videographer who's here today. If you feel that you have gotten something out of this event, find our video crew and tell them, because they would love to capture it on camera so that we can share what this experience is like with the world. So thank you, Push Story. That's it?
And on that note, you're going
Yes.
to introduce
Oh,
Rosemarie
yes.
while I set up the-
Okay, fantastic. All right, so we are at our keynote now, and our keynote is Rosemarie Truman, who is such an exceptional lady. I'm not sure how I met you. How did I meet you? She's asked me to be on her board of board of directors for an organization she founded and is CEO of called the Center for Advancing Innovation. And this organization, I can't believe everyone in the world doesn't know about it yet, but you will. You do now, and you will soon. She's created challenges that leverage government-funded IP to allow communities to tap into it. Everyone from artists, designers, engineers, developers, whatever you are, she wants you to apply to one of her challenges. So you can tap into the existing IP that we have funded as taxpayers, and yet only 0.01% ever sees the light of day. So she is accessing that latent IP and giving it to the community to build from. So with that, I give it over to Rosemarie Truman. Give her.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. And we should clap for our MC here. Thank you very much. So it's so wonderful to be in front of a whole bunch of amazing entrepreneurs and people who are supporting the supply chain community. We have a very exciting announcement for you today. So I'm going to start with asking you a few questions. How many people are in here to try to find collaborators? How many people are in here are just trying to understand what the deal flow is like in the supply chain space? All right, good. Okay, how many people in here are here for the cold pizza? Yeah, okay, all right. Okay, now that we've established that, we can. I'm going to talk a little bit about the background of how do we get to where we are in unleashing some of this intellectual property that we've been talking about. We work with 170,000 inventions, which equates to about 500,000 patents, that more than $1 trillion worth of IP that we in the United States have already paid for. So you'll see some pretty exciting ones. We'll talk about the background, and then we'll go through a big announcement that we're talking about today to launch 20 new companies, disruptive new companies in the supply chain space that align directly with the areas that you have mentioned. We'll go through some of the current and future state of supply chain, which Lisa already did a fabulous job of reviewing. But we wanted to kind of showcase a few of the inventions that we've found out of these 170,000. And then what is your opportunity? As Lisa teed up, thank you, we would like everyone in the room to come into our challenge in one way or another. We need a small village. And the call to action. So, all right, second quiz. What do these inventions up here have in common?
We paid for the tax.
We paid for them. Okay, excellent.
Technology.
The technology, yep.
Game changing.
All game changing.
Patented.
What? Sorry.
Patented.
Patented? Oh yeah, they're all patented. Yes. Where did if I sorry?
DARPA.
Yeah, that's for in many cases they were not designed for the purpose that are on the screen. Yes.
Space program or military?
Yeah. So most of these came from, except for the anti-HIV drug and the treatment for childhood leukemia, those two came from the NIH, National Institutes of Health. But GPS, LED lighting, smartphone technology, Tempur-Pedic came from NASA, right? And then, of course, the internet, DARPA. So we paid for all these inventions. So the fact that we have all these inventions sitting on the shelf and only 0.01% get out, we have a lot of value sitting on the shelf. As Lisa mentioned, we have we spend in the United States about $140 to $160 billion a year in intellectual property. The way that works is the federal labs spend about 15% of this money, and the rest of it is deployed to universities and hospitals for them to further develop R&D. So what we have done is we know that some of this intellectual property is trapped, right? So why is it trapped? Because first you have to find it. So finding it is it's complicated. You know, if you were to look at a particular large university website that has developed a lot of R&D, sometimes only 25% of the intellectual property that they've developed is on their website. So that means, where are you going to find it? we do a lot of sausage making to get the intellectual property. So then if you do find it, how do you evaluate it? So normally, if you're evaluating it, it's going to be a patent format. If it's in patent format, you have to deconstruct the patent into different fields. And then remember, a patent's old usually. It's a few years old. So then you have to augment the information around that patent to find out what has the inventor done recently. Because that's not, or the inventors. Usually there's like 6 or 7 or 8 inventors. And so you have to think about, what is their thinking, how have they built on this in terms of new intellectual property. So then you find the best invention that you really want it. It's a slam dunk. It's a commercially viable invention. It's de-risked. We spent $100 million on it, so it's ready to roll. All we have to do is tweak it, do a little bit more R&D. Now you have to get it. You have to do a deal with whoever owns that intellectual property. So if I say whoever, it's a university, a federal lab, or a hospital. So doing that deal is a licensing deal normally, because you're going to license it, probably exclusively, but you have to actually be able to, sometimes these deals take 2 years, and that's way too long. So then, of course, you have to get the invention. So let's say it's software, hardware, mechanical, electrical, and you've got a whole stack, communications on top. But they can't find the software. This happens. So that's problematic. So what we have done is we've systematically broken down these barriers. It took about 9 years to get to this point where we have, we have partnerships with 80+ organizations across the United States, more outside the United States. As I mentioned, we work with 170,000 inventions, about 500,000 patents, and basically we systematically commercialize the inventions through a challenge model, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. We have been named the Tinder for startups by an organization called Nature, which is it's like the highest profile magazine that exists in life sciences, and my team always tells me, Rosemarie, don't you know people wait their whole lives to get mentioned in Nature? But it's really interesting. I always can imagine a scientist going through this Nature magazine and then suddenly seeing Tinder for startups because it's all science. It was an outlier for sure. We have another partnership with an organization called Bio. It's the world's largest life sciences organization. They called us a Shark Tank on steroids and Wired Kickstarter for IP. So very proud of the track record we have gotten. But I want to talk a little bit about the headline of the slide. So, we went to the Kauffman Foundation, which is the world's largest entrepreneurial foundation, and we said, we think there's value at stake sitting on the shelf of the research enterprise in the United States. And there, we had this debate about it. Is there really value sitting there if it's not commercialized? Is there any value? Is it? So we argued that there's value. What we found was that, obviously so in the United States there are 5,000 research institutes. We were able to get 8 years of reliable data for 145. Okay, so we already know the number is going to come out is going to be wrong, but at least we got 145, institutes. We got 8 years of data. We found that for those 145 research institutes, there's 250,000 inventions. And so what we found was if we could get 1% more inventions out a year at an 80% failure rate, we could make a $1.5 trillion GDP impact on the U.S. economy. This is just the U.S. economy, not the global economy. We couldn't measure that. Well, we could have measured it, but it would have been a lot of assumptions. So this is the opportunity at stake, and this is what we have done. My background, I ran IBM's innovation strategy practice globally. So for the last 28 years, we've been doing due diligence, and investment banking is my background too. But this is kind of the heart of what we do is the due diligence part, and then of course we've had to do these create these agreements with universities, hospitals, and federal labs in order to get the intellectual property. Okay, so we have all these inventions in a big database. We then have lots and lots of proprietary vetting models, and then we commercialize them. We have lots of agreements, 360 agreements with corporate partners, large companies, like Blue Origin and others like that. We've launched 280 companies the last 4 years, as I mentioned, 170,000 inventions. I think one of the most important things, if you don't remember anything else about my presentation today, nothing, okay? It's really hard to get these inventions. It took me 6 years to do a deal with a particular large federal lab to create a startup-friendly model for licensing so that the startup could get the license in 6 months, because 2 years is too long. And $10 million up front is not doable for a startup. So, and I could give you all kinds of benchmarks for it, like what is a licensing, if you were like a normal company, how much would it cost you to get one of these inventions? I got the benchmarks all in my head in different federal labs and so on. But that's very, very important. We've been privileged to get a lot of awards for our model. We actually have the world's largest virtual accelerator. We've gotten Health and Human Services Secretary's Pick Innovation Award, which is their top award that they give out. A whole bunch of different awards that are interesting. But the most important thing that I think is the companies that we've launched. Out of the 280 companies we've launched, we have 3 unicorns. So that's really exciting. And these are companies that would not exist. We picked the invention, and we launched a company around the invention. So it's a trifecta. Start with the invention, launch the company around the invention, and match them with capital. I mentioned already some of our relationships. We also have a model, which I didn't mention, which is our ambassador model. So we want boots on the ground in particular locations, because our whole model is virtual, a global virtual model. So we have 55 ambassadors, and these ambassadors kind of galvanize the ecosystems to get good talent to come into our challenges. These are some of our IP relationships and some of the company relationships. One company in particular, or one organization in particular that should be on the right-hand side, which is not right now, but it will be the next time I present this, is the Walton family. So we just closed the deal with the Walton family to launch a challenge that we're announcing today called SCALE. And SCALE stands for Supply Chain and Logistics Enterprises. So you all can all go. I'm really pleased with this audience. You're not like looking at your cell phones and stuff. So, but you can look at your cell phone now and just go to scalechallenge.org. You can do it. It's okay. I won't get upset if you all look at your phone right now. Okay. So just some of the track record. Have about 60 companies that we've launched are in high tech, and the other ones are in life sciences. But started this challenge model back in 2012 out of necessity. We had these 11 awesome breast cancer inventions from the National Cancer Institute and the Avon Foundation for Women. More than $1 billion spent on them. And we couldn't find any organization that wanted these inventions. These inventions could make an enormous impact on breast cancer. But the large pharma, they have already their pipeline, right? And they have things in their pipeline behind that pipeline. So to basically license a new invention as a large company, and if it's going to take 2 years, it's a non-starter. And then, of course, there's an upfront payment. The average upfront payment is $1.5 million. Within 3 years, you're talking about $5 million. And by the way, you can't give the invention back if it doesn't work. You can't take that one back. So when you do a licensing deal with a federal lab, that money's spent. So I had to figure out a way to get these inventions, create companies around these inventions. So when you're riding the train from New York to DC, I had a presentation with this board of directors telling them, we found these 10 great inventions, but we couldn't find anybody who wanted them. So I'm like, so that's where Bloody Marys come in. So over a Bloody Mary in my laptop, thinking about what do we do about getting these inventions launched? I came up with this upside down model, which is kind of flipping the script. Because normally, challenges, what they do is they actually have people with ideas on pieces of paper come into the challenge and they pitch, right? And they get the demo day. In this case, we have the inventions. We'll start with the inventions and crowdsource the talent, and the talent will then compete for the privilege of launching a company around the invention. So it's upside down. All right, good. Okay. By the way, these are really cool inventions on the right-hand side, which I could bend your ear about for a long time. Talk about clean energy. This kite, these 3 companies here are going like gangbusters, all NASA technology. This one, I'll just talk just for 1 second about. So we all know about windmills. And so imagine there's this big, like a ribbon, like this thick, and about that wide, and it's about 50 to 100 feet long. So imagine now also there's like a motherboard with guide wires and a bunch of sensors on the ground. So this thing on the ground with all these sensors has guide wires that position this kite at the optimal location to capture energy, because the kite is made of piezoelectric energy. So it's generating energy at 10 to 100 times more than a windmill, and it costs about 100 times less. And you can move it around. So you could move it to a disaster relief site. You could take it camping with you. And anyway, this is one of my favorite. Well, I got lots of favorites, but so all right. So as I mentioned, we're launching the Scale Challenge today. So I'm very pleased, and thank you for the opportunity, Lisa, for inviting me to launch here, because it's perfect for this audience. Like I mentioned, I would like all of you to come into the challenge. And there's some interesting differences about this challenge versus others. First of all, this is the first time we've worked with the Walton family. So we had the executives from Walmart and Tyson's Food and J.B. Hunt involved in this challenge, and quite a lot of entrepreneurs as well. So the whole purpose of this challenge is to launch 20 new companies to disrupt supply chain. And as I mentioned, all the inventions we picked, we went through 16,000 inventions. We picked 20 inventions, and we're right now at a point of course, we're launching. So the outcome is to create 20 new companies. And I like the fact that this is perfect alignment with the presentation that you did just a moment ago, because out of this, we'll be creating brand new knowledge-based jobs in completely different areas than we've gone in the past. We'll be amplifying entrepreneurial ecosystems around the world, addressing economic inequality. So 60% of our companies are co-founded by women, 80% are co-founded by minorities, and 46% of our companies that we launch are in underserved, underprivileged regions. Create new markets, of course, and hopefully lift the innovation spirit in the community. How does it work? Now, this is a very detailed slide, and I don't want to take up your whole day. So I'll just mention there are 3 phases. Right now, we're accepting entries, so you can go to scalechallenge.org, scalechallenge.org, and enter right now. It takes you 10 minutes. You can enter as an individual or a team, so that entry process is very simple. When you come into the challenge, you're automatically put into the first phase, which is the elevator speech phase. In that phase, you create a 2-minute elevator speech, which describes the problem you're trying to solve, how your invention solves that problem that you picked, and the differentiating features about your team. So it's a 2-minute video, essentially, supported by an executive summary. If you get past the elevator speech phase, then you go into the business plan phase. That's where really the rubber hits the road. You create a 10-page business plan, full financial model with the risk-adjusted NPV valuation model on the cap table. And sometimes I know that those words are foreign, but if you want more information, I can talk to you about it later. And then, of course, you pitch it to our panel of judges. And we have a world-class panel of judges. Many of you in this room would be awesome judges, awesome advisors, awesome mentors for our teams. Or you might just want to enter the challenge. If you have an existing company, which I know there's lots of entrepreneurs in here who have existing companies, you can come into the challenge. And the opportunity is to pitch to the Walton family and a bunch of other investors as well. And the final phase, of course, is the startup, launching your startup. Or if you already have your startup, then just winning money. That's all. So we have an investor forum that we're putting together for this. So I'm just going to show you this slide as an example, just to try to put a point on the design of the challenge, because sometimes it is really the upside-down approach. So this is from our NASA Space Race Challenge. These inventions at the top are the 10 inventions that we picked from the NASA Space Race Challenge, which was one of our past challenges. And as you can see, like invention 1 actually had 6 teams, but this is illustrative in nature. And, invention 2 had 3 teams. So each invention gets a prize. Each invention, there'll be one company or 2 companies that form on it. And then, of course, the startups come out at the end, and then they receive seed funding, and hopefully will exit. So if you go to scalechallenge.org, you can see the timeline. This is a big timeline. I'll give this to Lisa to share, but it's also on the website. So you can come into the challenge until September. I do not recommend doing that. You should come into the challenge today. And I will look for all of you and, and reach out to you to ask you to come in. But the reason I say to come in as soon as possible is because we have a rolling entry process. Once our inventions are full, we don't accept any more entries. Well, sometimes I make exceptions because I make the rules. So, so what kind of people do we want into the in the challenge? If you want to be an ambassador, please, let us know that. That's is usually the most amount of time to devote, but it's about 4 hours a month. Mentors spend about 2 hours a month. Mentors we put on teams. And then we connect you with the team. If the synergy doesn't work out or it's not gonna, we don't force anything. We can put you on a different team. Advisors will only spend an hour, like literally. An advisor will do like a webinar, 30-minute webinar with some Q&A on a topic that you are expert at. Judging will not happen until 2020, April of 2020. That'll be about 8 hours of time commitment because you have to read business plans and financial models. We're going to have an investor forum with a whole bunch of different investors. So I know that there are some investors in this room, so we'd love to have you come into the investor forum. And of course, we all want cheerleaders too. That means you get to send the information out to your friends who you know will want to join. And so what's the opportunity for coming into the challenge? The most important one is creating a new startup with seed funding. Also getting a lot of media attention. We get lots of media attention with Wired, Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, Huffington Post, many other national publications and TV and so on. And our startups do as well, because we mention our startups in these things. Prize money, there's prize money attached to each invention. There's 20 inventions in this challenge. Accelerator training, we actually have, as I mentioned, a very long accelerator program. It's 8 months. It's virtual, so you can do the accelerator programming from anywhere. We've gotten lots of White House awards for this, 2 very, very important ones. We were considered number 6 in the top 10 entrepreneurial things that happened during the entire Obama administration, and we're number 36 in the top 100 things that ever happened during the Obama administration as well. And that's because, part and parcel because of this accelerator training and also creating companies out of thin air, essentially. So this accelerator training is 40 classes, 12 company building exercises, and 16 weeks of hot seats. Do you all know what a hot seat is? It's a pitch. So you come into our meeting, our day of our hot seat, and I say, okay, well, today you get 30 seconds. And the next time is 5 minutes, and the next time, so it's randomly pitching. But our teams get really good. And I think the other thing is that we put people in front of these world-class mentors that they would have perhaps a difficult time accessing, like executive vice president at Walmart. So I think I'm going to go a little bit more quickly through here because everybody in this room probably understands the current state of the supply chains, and there's lots and lots of challenges. There's problems with demand planning, missing the mark, creating more of one thing than another thing, not doing the correct analysis to understand what do people want. Production, so not being able to produce or predict the future about when you need to produce something so that you produce a lot more of something and you put it in inventory. Inventory, automation, and optimization, distribution. Well, so in the future, distribution through unmanned vehicles is going to be interesting because you might lose some of them, right? They don't know where they are. So there's really a lot of challenges with unmanned vehicles. During the whole distribution cycle, a lot of things are pulled out and put in that are counterfeit or cybersecurity, and then of course we talked about landfills. So what if you could just improve this a little bit? And I say a little bit, there's a great McKinsey study on this, but just making some minor optimization elements would help create 10% improvement in working capital, 20% lower handling and labor costs, 15% reduction in markdowns, and there's a lot more in the study. So, all right, let's look at distribution. I mentioned there's 20 inventions in this challenge. So I just thought I'd pick out these 5. So in distribution, you need to know where something is. You need to be able to tell a thing, a drone, how to navigate to where it needs to go. And sometimes you need to self-navigate, meaning you need to navigate it because it needs a remote control, semi-autonomous. How do you get into tight spots in a warehouse? How do you deliver in tight spots? I can't wait to tell you about that one. And another one of my favorites, which is wirelessly charging, because we all know about how it is when your battery is constantly dead on your cell phone. Well, what about your battery constantly dead on your drone? That gets a little even worse. So very quickly, just going through a few inventions. So the problem is somebody goes into a store, where are the customers really looking? But another problem is you don't know where your drone, your self-driving car, your robot is. They don't know where it is on the map, and there's no GPS available. And you need to navigate your UAV. So this particular invention, there's actually 2 inventions in this one. One's called Pin Me, which determines the location of a smart device or vehicle without GPS. And UAV Air Patrol, by the way, it's my terminology, it's not what they call it, which will navigate your UAV using radio frequencies. Another one is, UAVs don't really know where they are in relation to objects. So there's a lot of challenges around this. Or the UAVs get confused because there are other signals around. So this invention, again, without GPS, removes distractions from the drones, the robots, the phone vision, to let them know where they are so that they don't bump into things and crash. All right. This one is one of my favorites. So you have your Tesla, you have your drone, you have to plug it in. Well, what if you didn't have to plug it in? You could just wirelessly charge it. This one will actually wirelessly charge unmanned vehicle, any kind of vehicle. And I love this one. This is one by NASA. It's an electric car. The wheels go 360 degrees. Every single part of this car is fail-proof, meaning if one thing breaks, something else picks up. So I just want it for myself, actually. but can you imagine how useful it could be? And it's configurable in lots of different ways to make it smaller or bigger. But you could just slide into a spot. No more having to do parallel parking. All right. So there's more. There's a bunch more inventions. When you go into the website, the one on the right-hand side is called the Robonaut. It was been in the International Space Station for 8 years. They're working on the next generation. More than $100 million has been spent on this. It's an amazing robot. So I've already gone through some of our case studies and accolades, but the point is that when we create startups, our startups, they win a lot of awards. So they start with our challenge, but we push them into Y Combinator and many other places. And actually 50% of the top startup challenges are won by our companies. So we are really good deal flow for them. And they win a lot of non-dilutive money. And so 9 of the companies we've launched, 9 founders. We have our top 30 under 30 under Forbes. I mean, I could go on and on. They win Mass Challenge every year. I don't have any children. So these are I get all these things that I think most parents get, which are, oh, we won another $100,000. I get text messages like that all the time. It's awesome. Some of them have raised hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's really satisfying to see an invention get off the shelf and get it moving. I mentioned some of our awards. Powerful Innovation Toolkit. We've had 8 mentions by the White House. Shark Tank on steroids, etc. Okay, so just a recap of some of the exciting things that have been happening with us. I'll mention one thing I did not mention before. The Government Accountability Office, it's a pretty funny story, actually. So Government Accountability Office is the watchdog across other federal labs, and we have all these agreements with federal labs. And so they came by and they said, hey, we want to know what you're really doing. And then it's, by the way, scared our partners like crazy. Like, what are we doing? Are we doing the wrong thing? Anyway, so a whole year of questions, a whole year. Like, and then I get a question, and they would go to the federal lab person. The federal lab person would send it to me, and I'd write it up, and I'd go back and forth. Anyway, they gave us a big award. It was awesome, but it could have been bad. It was pretty funny. So they gave us an award of best in innovative commercialization models. Have a lot of partners, as I mentioned, across the ecosystem, and personally, as I mentioned before, I ran IBM's innovation strategy practice globally. One of the reasons I started my own company, because it was 42 hours a week in the air. Half of my career is outside the United States. But I've had a lot of big clients in the supply chain area, which I'm recruiting. Like, of course, all the oil and gas providers, GM, VW, Caterpillar, Ford, Honda, Fiat, they were all my clients. Schneider, Trucks, Visteon were my clients. I led the Watson strategy for monetization when I was at IBM. Did Microsoft's innovation strategy, actually, Oracle as well, a bunch of retailers as well, and so we'll be bringing them all into the fold. And we have some really good advisors and judges already that are part of our invention selection committee. So this is really the thing that I want you to remember. Join scalechallenge.org. All right? Okay. Any questions? Yes.
I imagine the eligibility to join is for U.S. companies.
No, any company can come into the challenge.
It's global.
Global, yes.
Yeah, so I don't know if you've approached the university programs. So I started a master program at a university in Nova Scotia. We have a Master of Technology, Entrepreneurship and Innovation program, and our students would die to
Oh,
get
cool.
access
Yeah.
to innovations.
We
like
want them.
this. Yeah, and I know that you have in your U.S. universities as well those programs.
Yes.
So I can imagine, you'll have all sorts of takers. So I'm emailing my dean right now.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Love it. She's a cheerleader. We should clap for her. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Some of the innovations are patent pending. Can you still license them?
Yes. Sorry, the question was, some of the inventions are patent pending. Can you still license them? And the answer is yes. Some of them, like the Robonaut, you'll notice, I think Cody's my right-hand guy. And I'm not going to be here the whole day, but Cody will be here. So if you have any questions, you can reach Cody. He's right there. But I think the Robonaut, which you can correct me, has had about 100 patents. Yeah, it's just enormous. So we got all ranges. Yeah.
Tell us how you go through the process of looking at all these inventions and picking these 20 that you picked. Like, how do you filter all that?
You want to know the sausage making process. So I think I mentioned I've been doing due diligence for 28 years. I started my career at Goldman Sachs and basically started learning due diligence at that point. So that's really my specialty, is growth strategy. This innovation strategy that we called at IBM is really growth strategy. And so what we start with is a multidimensional segmentation analysis, which segments the inventions into buckets where you can actually then apply due diligence models. But just backing up for a second, we start with getting the base patent data. We have all these algorithms, we parse the data, and then we have another augmentation. Because we can't even start the due diligence process until we actually have the base data and the augmented data, and also harmonized with the multidimensional segmentation analysis applied. Then we can, because we've divided them into chunks, the inventions into small chunks, we can then start to apply the due diligence model. And we do the due diligence in stages. We try to kill things first, because there's lots of reasons something might fail, and we're looking for commercial viability and de-risked. So, and then, at the end, if we apply the entire due diligence model, it's 8 categories, like market attractiveness, operational feasibility, et cetera. It's 158 variables.
That's all.
I had an investor tell me, Rosemarie, we would never do that much work. Yes.
What's the artist participation?
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Oh, gosh, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Yes, okay. So I don't know if you all have ever heard, Alice Walton is the visionary behind Crystal Bridges. Crystal Bridges, I believe, is the #1 museum now in the United States. It's beautiful. And this was a very interesting process because we are partnered with the Walton family on this initiative. And a requirement for every team is that there's an artist on every single team. Any kind of artist, and obviously there's a wide variety of artists, musicians and culinary artists and all kinds of artists. An artist on every team. And we're not discriminating against any artist. Any kind of artist can be on any team. We can have multiple artists on a team. But that is going to be a very interesting experiment, because I say experiment because we have looked high and low for examples of this model. And because we wanted to talk to somebody else who's forced artist on a team. And we couldn't find any. There's one gentleman who's a chief engineer at Salesforce.com who's created an organization called Codame, Codame, and I'm talking to him at 6 o'clock tonight. And we'll see. He's started an initiative to have entrepreneurs connect with artists, but not necessarily have artists on the startup teams. So it'll be interesting. Yes.
The website for Scale Challenge mentions seeding businesses to Northwest Arkansas. Do you need to move to Arkansas?
Some will. Yeah, so part of what the Walton family wants to do is to boost the ecosystem in Arkansas. And so 20 of the companies that will be in this challenge will be in Northwest Arkansas, which is actually very beneficial because you have a lot of people there. Did you know Northwest Arkansas is the center of the universe for supply chain? Did you know that? 1,500 companies are in Northwest Arkansas focused on supply chain. And of course, Walmart headquarters and Tyson's headquarters and so on are there too. JB Hunt. All right, how many people are entering? Oh, yeah. This side of the room, come on! This is a competition. What's up with this side of the room? All right, good. Okay, thank you. All right, well, I really appreciate your time today and very delighted to have had the opportunity to present the challenge and launch it today and have you on my team.
How awesome is she? Rosemarie Truman, amazing woman, and my girl crush.